where we are in terms of bridging barriers and building bridges. May I start by thanking our seniors for accepting us here. In fact, when Bangon spoke and told us when he covered his first meeting, I was the more humbled. And I think it's part of his character, that's humility, and which I must say most of our seniors here have in accepting that the younger ones should also come and share their thoughts on what they think the profession should be. I was asked to present on the general theme of this celebration. You know, we are celebrating the Translation Day. And I thought from that theme I could carve out something that would probably help me guide my thoughts. I therefore decided to present what I have gathered under this theme, Milestones and Perspectives in Language Mediation. In fact, my presentation would not be an answer to any question. Indeed, I will be asking questions that all of us here can answer. And definitely from these answers, we may individually adopt resolutions that can take our profession higher. May I also thank APTIC for keeping to tradition. It is part of the game. We must be seen to be doing this. We must. And by that token, I'm sure we have held the hands of other young men like Speedlink, Speed Enterprise, and others who are coming up to sensitize the public on what translators and interpreters are doing. We started here by explaining why Translation Day today, by celebrating St. Jerome. I thought it wise to start as well by celebrating our own St. Jeromes, some of the persons who preceded us, but which we may not know who started these professions or this profession. When we talk of these professions, we are talking about translation and interpretation, but at times we put interpretation under the umbrella of translation. So I went down memory lane to look at what has been happening, and I discovered, which is a truism, that translation and interpretation has been part of our history from the word go. We have people who've been working as translators and interpreters long before we even started recognizing the profession, because when you ask people the history, to tell you the history of translation and interpretation, go back to the Nuremberg trials and so on, but you'll discover that this profession was institutionalized in Cameroon as far back as 1916. Okay, when the British defeated the Germans, they took over. In fact, the Germans started using interpreters, but we have very little information about who served as interpreters. So the British absorbed interpreters into the judicial department, and that is how they were being used. And a few names would actually feature on the next slide. This tribute would go to people like Geoffrey Isaac Bongo, who was an unqualified interpreter, and I am just using the terms used then in their contracts of employment. Unqualified interpreter appointed under the colonial government of on the 8th of February 1921. We also have people like Johnny Bafu Fondon, who is the father of the late veteran politician Francois Fonin, who also served in the German administration as the interpreter. You may want to know that the British territory in Cameroon spread beyond what we know today. Even Yaoundé was part of the British territory from 1916 to 1922. So we have Johnny Bafu Fondon, to whom we love our hearts. We have Fongam Simon, who was an unqualified interpreter. These are names we may know, but we never knew they were interpreters. We have Elonge Godlieb was an unqualified interpreter. In 1921, we wrote that he would speak the languages, Kumba languages, and was paid 10 shillings. We have Ayaba Juda was employed in Bamenda in 1916 as an interpreter. He worked with Johannes Kisot, who was employed on the 22nd of July 1921, and placed on a salary of 66 penny. We have other names: Paul Mbole Kuwa, Nathaniel Malomba Bebe, Daniel Ekoko, Akima Tine. These are people who could speak our Longo languages and were employed as interpreters in the British colonial government. Now, at independence, actually, the government recognized the need to further this experience and used mostly specialists from outside Cameroon. Thereafter, they sent some of our seniors to go to Georgetown and beyond to study translation and interpretation. Now, when this was weighing so heavily on the budget of the government of Cameroon, the government decided to create the Advanced School of Translators and Interpreters. That it was in 1985, created by Presidential Decree number 551 of 7th August 1985. And the missions were spelled out as you would see on the slides. Provide initial training of translators and interpreters, conduct research in translation and interpretation, obtain further training and refresher courses for active translators and interpreters, and provide scientific support for the promotion of official bilingualism. You will notice that ASTI, when it was created in 1985, had an extensive mission. My question here, I told you I'll be asking questions. Are we sure that we lived up to the expectations? Remember, ASTI in 1985 was created by presidential decree as a university center, but it was placed under the budget of the presidency of the Republic. It's true that it had a budget of about 70 million then, but almost everything was taken care of by the presidency of the Republic because it held translators and interpreters in great esteem and thought it could lean on us to fulfill some of the greatest missions of the young state, that is Cameroonizing Cameroonians. Okay, if you allow me to use that term. Do we think we lived up to expectations? A while ago, we celebrated the presence of the representative of the Musonge Commission, the Bilingualism Commission, but it may behoove us to notice that that was the mission of translators and interpreters. That is the mission of ASTI. Did we live to expectation? Can we blame anyone about what is happening at the moment? May I say that my presentation builds on a simple observation. I am certainly the Secretary General of the Advanced School of Translators and Interpreters, but for the short time that I spent around booths and translating, I also went some places. I am the coordinator of the Pan-African Masters Consortium in Translation and Interpretation, which is a United Nations European Union funded program, which means I also usually am invited. On the 26th of this month, I was invited to take part in the celebration of the European Union Day of Multilingualism. So there I also made some observations which we will share. I also happen to hold other offices. But what I want to say is that the role of the translator in building bridges is far and wide. It's really great. And we may want to question whether what we are doing today, almost 40 years after the creation of ASTI, really working in the right direction, helping the state fulfill its missions and live to expectations. When the Mozambique Commission was created, we all complained and said these are things that should be done by translators, but we forgot that maybe the state was exasperated and decided to take away part of the missions of ASTI and give it to a specialized unit and dump translators and interpreters because they have not fulfilled or they have not lived to expectations. I'm just thinking loud. You can further the reflections. So, why did I bring in the European Union here? Because when I went there, I also noticed that the General Delegation of Translation and Interpretation, for example, is not headed by neither a translator nor an interpreter. It's headed by a politician. And when I asked, they told me they are checking to be sure that translators and interpreters are using taxpayers' money efficiently. So far. You want to notice that in most cases, in most organizations, we take a huge chunk of the budget of these institutions, and we must be relevant. My presentations therefore build on this maybe daring observation that we translators and interpreters are said like these surrogate mothers who are very important when somebody wants to have a baby, but once the baby is born, the best thing you can do is to disappear. They don't want to see you around. Now, the question is, what are we doing to get out of that situation? Are we going in the right direction? Are we professionals? Are we professionals? And to maybe further my reflections, I brought in some theories, not to go back to the classroom, but to help guide my thinking wide. Because for more than 10 years I've been teaching, and what I get as feedback, what I gather from the field, I want to know, are we professionals? At the end, we should be able, through this red tape, to decide and agree if we are professionals and working to make sure that everybody is fully satisfied that we are playing our role. My reflections on the status of our profession builds on two theories: the threat theory and the control theory. What does the threat theory? The threat theory is actually a series of sociological theories that opine on how an occupation develops to become a profession. On how an occupation develops to become a profession. Now, what does the threat theory say? The threat theory is of the opinion that for an occupation to develop to become a profession, it must, ensure adherence to a code of ethics, have a body of theoretical knowledge, ensure licensure and registration, and loyalty to colleagues. What do we mean by adherence to a body of theoretical knowledge? It means we must have associations that back the profession with binding rules, which means these are not lists of prescriptions, these are rules that must be respected, failure of which sanctions will follow. Now, I said I will not be answering any questions, I will just be asking questions, and we would all decide at the end whether we are a profession or not. Secondly, a body of theoretical knowledge. They say for a profession to exist, professionals must be seen to be publishing, to be writing about what they are doing, to be informing the public about what they are doing, to be building literature. I hope that is what we are doing. What is the amount of literature we have produced? You see, we stated here that This profession was institutionalized in 1916. How many years later? More than a century later. What can the common man boast of in terms of literature? How can he gather, how can he be informed about what we're doing for him to trust, respect, and employ us? Licensure and registration. You know, for a profession to exist, as the trade theory says, I'm not the one saying it, we must create alliances with the state. We must be seen to be registered, create alliances, we must be recognized by the state. Loyalty to colleagues, we must avoid grey marketing, respect the norms, respect hierarchy, respect collaborators. Let me go to the next. Now, the control theory on its part goes beyond the internal characteristics of the profession to look at how that profession relates with other components of the labor market, how it relates with other components of the labor market. It must ensure control over the substance of the profession. Powerful associations, or rather powerful professions, are backed by powerful associations. Who determines who enters and leaves the profession should be within the jurisdiction of these associations, or whatever has been validated to perform that role. How are practitioners trained? Are we sure we know how translators, those who enter this profession and who are accepted here, do we know how they are trained? Let me use the example of the medical profession, which we all know. When medical schools were, created here and there because people discovered how profitable it could be, the medical association vetoed those schools and caused the government to close them. Even some ministers had their schools closed down because of the medical association. That is why the control theory says the powerful professions are backed by powerful associations. The Bar Association, despite the fact that anybody with a law degree, even without a law degree, can defend in court, they have made sure that only those who are accepted by the Bar Association can go to court and be accepted as an ex officio lawyer. Who decides on the level of remuneration? Are we the ones professionals who really call the shots and decide on who pays, how much, and so on? What is our social impact? A while ago, our very senior colleague, Prof. Somba, said we seem to be illiterate in our mother tongues. Well, I am being modest. Community interpretation has been somewhat part of this profession. I don't want to answer questions, but how much have we invested in community interpretation? Very soon the government will create the House of Chiefs. Do we expect our chiefs to go there and be speaking the Queen's language? Go there and be speaking Moliere's language? That the chief of Bafor comes there and is speaking pedantic English? We should anticipate. How many of us can speak? Even if we don't speak, how much have we done to make sure that this component is developed? Let me tell you, even bricklayers have been acknowledged. There is an order of engineers, and how do they do it? They insist on the social component of their profession. They make sure that the government knows that if they are not there, something bad will happen, the society will not function. How has our profession impacted the lives of the common man? The government knows that if engineers don't work, houses will crumble and kill. If doctors are angry today, patients will die. But if translators are angry, what will happen? That's the social impact. We must be seen to be impacting the lives of the government would never recognize us. We will just remain there at this high pedigree, enjoying the beauty as it lasts. A while ago I talked about training. Are we fully involved in training? This year, ASTI could not hold its board of management. Is that it? Yes, meeting because it didn't have all the stakeholders on board. That is one of the only schools that do not boast of achievements from its alma mater. The alma mater is a bit distant from it because up till now we've not been able to have a representative of the alma mater to push this project through. Even the Bilingualism Commission is still questioning our invitation of the Bilingualism Committee. We wrote to them and they are still questioning, why are you writing? Are you sure this letter is cogent? And so on, but it was signed by the Vice Chancellor. But now I'm just telling you, the Bilingualism Commission is part of the missions of ASTI. A training institution is like the nursery. You cannot control the market with good fruits if you don't go to the nursery to make sure that the best are selected, nurtured, and sent out. So let's think. So training is fundamental. Whatever we do, we must keep an eye on what is happening there. Now, I probably didn't introduce the market disorder model, which is actually the reflections of another scientist, Joseph Tseng, who used these theories to analyze the translation market in Taiwan. This theory, or these theories, were also used to analyze the translation and interpretation market in the United States or in New York. Now, the market disorder theory, or model, what does it say? Because it's not yet a theory. It states that most translation professions are what we may call professions at the stuttering stage. They are still at the beginning of the creation of a profession, and they exhibit characteristics of a profession at the stuttering stage. It says that at the beginning of every profession, you start with a lot of disorder. Everybody coming in, you have no control over who comes in and how they leave. You have no control over how they are remunerated. You cannot dictate any norms. You cannot insist on any values. Training schools come up. But at a certain point, everybody understands the need. When the market seems to be saturated, there is a critical level. Everybody understands the need to come together, to work together and regulate the market. And I hope we may be thinking towards that direction if we are not yet there. I'm going to use the example of Senegal a while ago, and I will call names. Senior Malik C, when he came back to the country, he went down, put together all those who were working as translators and interpreters, and those who were not certified, and talked to them. He said, look, this is a noble profession, very rewarding. I know you've been working, you are not qualified, but I will not drive you away. So please come together, let's set norms. And they all accepted. They said, if this venerable man from his pedigree can come down and talk to us in this way, and they respect him. And that is one of the most flourishing markets on the continent. They control, even the PAMSIT I'm telling you about, Gaston Berger is a member of PAMSIT. When I went there for curriculum harmonization, he was part of the team. And he could dictate how much teachers in Dakar will be paid. And the European Union had to accept, which was almost 20 times higher than what we accept in Cameroon. You understand what organization to do. So please, ladies and gentlemen, what I had to contribute is just sharing my own thoughts and reflections on the status of our profession, if we agree that we are into a profession, and see how much we still need to do in order to better our contributions in the fulfillment of the profession of our various countries, of our continent, and the world at large. Because behind any peace treaty is a translator and an interpreter. The European Union, they use 2,000 conference interpreters, 1,500 translators, and 100 support staff. ASTI has not even trained 1,500 translators and interpreters after almost 40 years. The government wants to recruit 500 within 3 years. A tracer study was caused by the presidency of the Republic in 1999 to know where ASTI products are and what has been achieved. This project was sponsored by the Association of African Universities. At the end of the day, we discovered that most of our products are going for greener pastures, nobody's staying back home. Increasingly, qualified interpreters are going. There is no terminology bank like the multi-term and termium that we have in Canada. It was a list of observations, remarks, project observations and remarks. And these were pointers to the politicians as to what are the achievements of the Advanced School of Translators and Interpreters. Today, many schools are coming up, but should we remain at that single level of training translators and interpreters? Is that all what will take to ensure a world without barriers? On this note, I want to thank you all for listening. I hope I was meaningful.